So are there any adjustments to the agenda that anyone's aware of on the board or Max? There being none, and there are only a few citizens, but are there any citizens' comments apart from the draft land use ordinance? There being none, regarding the minutes, which we usually handle every meeting, and we do have a backlog at this point, but I propose that we simply defer those to the next meeting. Could I have a motion to that effect?
I motion we postpone the minutes to the next meeting. Review
For a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jim. All those in favor signify aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. There being no old business, I would like to move to new business, which is the public hearing for the draft land use ordinance, followed by the draft floodplain management ordinance, and then a discussion of the public hearing on the rezoning of the property for the A.D. Gray School. Bill, I understand that you're prepared to kind of review the major changes on this. Is that correct?
We're going to be going through all the big changes that have happened. So we're walking through the
Okay.
More through what's happened.
Yeah. Okay. Is that your preferred order for this? Is to tackle the big one first and the smaller ones after?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask something? Are we live on YouTube right now? We're live?
Yeah.
Okay.
Shows that we are.
All right.
Yep.
That's why my video's off.
Okay. What, you don't want us to see your ceiling?
No,
anyway.
My hair is a mess.
Okay. Join the club. Excuse me. So I will ask everyone's forbearance as we go through this meeting that I'm pretty tired. So having driven 1,500 miles in 2 days, and then picked berries all day today, I will do my best to hang in there with everyone. But I did want to start, so I don't want to forget. For those, I know Bill is present and Holly, and Elaine was on the committee, but I wanted to thank the committee and the select board and Julie, who's been involved as well, and Bill in doing all this work. I know the other board members and I understand the level of effort that is involved in modifying the ordinance and coming up with drafts like this. So I want to thank everybody ahead of time, so I don't forget to do that. So Bill, I will turn it over to you to go through the major changes, if you would.
All right. I'm going to do a general overview, and then I just want to alert Max, you want to talk about the yellow marks?
Right.
First.
So Bill will first start by just giving the general summary of what the ordinance, what we're going to be looking at tonight. But what I sent last night, the yellow highlights, are the proposed changes that the land use committee saw on Monday night that they'd like to have the planning board consider as well. One second, Jan Mindy just joined. The highlights are any sentences or words that are going to be removed, and the underlined are words that are being added in. And anything that's highlighted just shows where the changes are compared to what you got on your ordinance before Labor Day.
Okay.
Well, most of the changes were minor, things that should have been taken out that we missed, article numbers that needed to be corrected, right, things like that.
And those are items that the planning board will have to approve tonight.
Yep. What I'll do is I'll just go through the articles one by one, pause if there's any questions. There's a few of them we have not changed, and I'll alert you to those.
Okay. Let me sorry, excuse me, but I just want to make sure I understand. So can you Bill, can you make sure to cover, because I have a hard copy here and I don't have the opportunity to have the yellow highlighted in front of me at the same time as we're going through this and doing the Zoom. So if you could please point out the key areas, because if we're expected to approve all of the highlighted areas,
Sure.
and we don't have those in front of us in our hard copies at home and we're Zooming, I'm a little uncomfortable with that, to be honest
So,
with you.
Scott, what I'll do is after Bill has gone over the general idea of what's happening in each article, we'll then go through each page. Well, I say each page. I'll say the page number out loud for where this change is and the associated section. Like
Okay.
in Article 1, there's something I'll get to. But
Yeah.
Bill
Okay.
and I will use Article 1 as a demonstration since that's probably the easiest one to do right now.
Yeah,
Okay.
Article 1, we haven't we're to carry over from the existing ordinance, so I'll let Max go through the particular things that were changed there.
So
modified.
So the only change that we have since Monday night is on page 1-3. This is the last sentence of the first paragraph, and then items 1.91.1, point 2, and point 3. Those were referencing the parts of our shoreline ordinance that were being removed when we redid it back in 2018, but we no longer have those in our ordinance. So those are just being removed.
Yep. That was because we changed to have the state do the timber harvest, monitor the timber harvest. Great. Okay.
Just for clarification, on page 1-3, the sentence on the date established under 38 MRSA 438A5, the following provisions of this ordinance are repealed. That, along with 1.9.1.1, point 1.2, and point 1.3 are all being removed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only change.
On Article 2, administration, we did not change anything here. There were a couple of changes due to nomenclature and also article numbers, and Max will go through those.
Right. So for Article 2, the first change since, well, am I going through all changes or just the ones we did since Monday?
all the change, all the ones that are yellow.
Okay. So changes I have, first one is on the first page, 2.1.2.1. This is the last two words. It should say Article 6.7.4 matrix. And then the second item is on 2.1.2.2. This is right after. The first sentence should read review, and this is the change, planning board applications, and then subdivision applications, and then it goes regular from there. We're just having planning board applications instead of site review applications. So that was the first page. Then there were a few changes that happened on page 2-3. First view is under 2.2.3.1 reviews. The first sentence, we are striking out site plan and subdivision reviews. We are changing the references, so it reads as follows: Article 3, Article 11, and Article 13. So the first, and then the last sentence, we are striking out Section F, Schedule of Uses. So these items should read: the planning board shall be responsible for reviewing and acting upon applications and 4 should also be removed. Upon applications in accordance with the provisions of Article 3 of this ordinance, as well as certain shoreline zoning applications in accordance with the provisions of Article 11 and hazardous materials applications in accordance with Article 13. Following approval, the applicant shall return to the code enforcement officer for building and other permits. The planning board shall also review applications requiring planning board approval set forth in Article 3.
Okay.
Next, under 2.3.1, activities listed in the schedule of land uses, we are correcting the first reference that's in the first paragraph. So it is Article 6, and we are removing section F.
Okay.
Next, in the second to last line of that paragraph, we are replacing site plan review with planning board review.
Okay.
Next, under 2.3.3 shoreland zoning activities, we are taking all those references and changing it to Article 11.
Mm-hmm.
Next, 2.3.4 floodplain management activities. Article 8 is being removed and replaced with floodplain management ordinance for both the first and last sentence. Next, on page 2-4, under 2.3.6.3 notification, the second to last line, we are removing his. So it should read the reasons for rejection. Next, 2.3.7.2 appeals. We are changing the reference and striking out 11 section D, so it instead reads with the provisions of Article 5, which is where the appeals section will be located. And that is all the changes I had for Article 2.
Okay.
Article 3, title application. I thought somebody said, I'm sorry. Article 3, application review. This is a new section that puts together the 3 different types of application reviews. The code officer review. There's a new one, is town planner and code officer review. That has a provision in it that allows the code officer and the planner to bump things up to the planning board when they decide or see that, read the language here, they can have the application submitted to the planning board for review if they find that the application would benefit from a public hearing and review by the planning board. So they can use some discretion to, say, geez, this would be better undertaken by the board. And then the planning board review, very similar to your site review with a couple of exceptions. We baked in the public hearing process. So whenever an application comes to the planning board, it automatically has a public hearing. So it's not, it's just happened automatically. And in the submission requirements, what we tried to do, the logic in this is that the submission requirements are basically the same for all 3 types of review. So regardless of who's doing the review, the materials that they submit are very similar, but there's some additional items required for the planning board review on page 3-4. Mostly due to the, typically the planning board would be reviewing larger projects. And likewise in the review criteria is the same for all 3 types of review, but there's some additional review for this for the planning board, which gives the planning board review over the site and the compatibility of the site in reference to neighboring properties and environmental conditions. The difference of this approach is that the review criteria is basically where code officer, planner, and/or planning board will be making their decision on the application. So these are the, we've just spelled out the items that will be required for the board to acknowledge that the application conforms to the ordinance.
Mhm.
Max, I don't know if there's any changes there.
So for changes, first one starts on page, first one is on page 3-1, first page, under 3.1, purpose. On the final line, we're including the word "the" before area. Man-made features of the area.
Hmm.
Next is on page 3-2. This is the second paragraph from the top. It's just before 3.3 general requirements. And this is the last line. You will see the word "bore." That should be born, B-O-R-N-E, by the applicant.
Hmm.
The E? Is that how you spell it?
B-O-R-N-E. That's how you had it, correct, Polly?
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Next, 3.3.1 waivers. There's two in that first sentence. We're removing A before submission and adding an S at the end of requirement. So it should read, an applicant may submit a written waiver request from one or more submission requirements if it can be shown that the submission is inapplicable, and the rest of the sentence goes on. And I'm sorry, there's another one that I just missed. There should be in the second sentence, if approved, should have a comma right after it. I'll make sure I check that so I don't forget all those. Next, under 3.3.6, boundary survey requirements, the second to last line, you should see lot period location. We're changing it so the period is a comma and the location is spelled with a lowercase l. So we're combining the two sentences. Then next is on page 3-3. This is the first paragraph. It's the second from the top. The
I'm
first
not seeing that, Max. You're on 3-3?
page 3-3, correct. This is the first paragraph of
My yellow is different than your yellow that you sent today.
All right, well, it should be under 3.4 public hearing requirements.
Okay, that's on 3-2 of mine, so.
Okay.
Okay,
After the semicolon, it should say and publish a notice of the public hearing at least. Do you see that spot?
yep,
All right. First thing is we are adding the word 7 and putting the number 7 in parentheses. And then the next is in the town is being stricken and removed.
that's not on mine either. I'm just wondering how,
In the town isn't on, is this the digital copy you're looking at?
yeah, the one you sent today.
That should be, Polly, do you have that highlighted? All right.
I'm looking at the digital copy also.
Does it not have a highlight in the town stricken from it?
Yes, on mine it does.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I think I jumped ahead, so okay.
All right.
Sorry.
So those are the two changes to that paragraph. Next is item 3.5.1.3. After name, we are getting rid of the capital A and instead putting in street address, lowercase. And then under 3.5.1.4, after property location, that will also say street address. On page 3-4, item 3.5.1.11.10. The end of the sentence will read fire ponds or similar features. Item 3.5.1.11.13. Beginning with habitat, the B and H are capitalized. Because we're talking about an organization with that one. And then at the bottom, at 3.5.2.1, I don't know how it reads in the other ones, but location is lowercase after project title. And then right underneath that, engineer and other professionals are lowercase. And then, am I going through all typo corrections, or am I just doing like the bigger?
What you have yellowed.
Okay. On page 3-5, 3.6.1.5. The proposal will not, and then the A is removed, have an adverse impact. For 3.6.1.6, water bodies is split into 2 words. 3.6.1.7, stormwater is 1 word. And then last on 3-6, item 3.6.2.3, the second to last line, water bodies is 2 words.
Okay.
Article 4, non-conforming uses. We did not change this. This was changed. There were major changes when the planning board updated the shoreline zoning section. So this was not changed at all.
Other than references.
Oh yeah, there were some. Yeah,
There's yellow.
article sections.
Yep. In terms of corrections on page 4-1, item, well, I'm sorry, there's actually 2. Under 4.3.3.1, non-shoreland areas, last sentence, or yeah, last line, Article 5 for appeals.
Okay.
And then 4.3.3.2, floodplain area. We're striking out Article 8 and replacing it with floodplain management ordinance.
Okay.
Next, on page 4-2, under 4.4.1, I think I said it right. At the end of the second line, that should be Article 11.
I have Article 7.
Yes, I noticed that when I was printing out these copies today.
But it should be 11.
It should be 11.
Okay.
And then on page 4-4, item 4.4.5.1, the last sentence should read cover similar to that which was disturbed, destroyed, or removed.
Okay.
On page 4-6, paragraph 4.5.5, expansion of non-conforming non-residential uses. In the middle of it, at the end, it should say Article 3, and then correcting reference application review of this ordinance. And ordinance has a capital O. 4.5.6, expansion of non-conforming residential uses. Again, the middle line, third from the bottom. Correcting the reference to Article 3, application review. Next, 4.6.1, non-conforming lots, second line from the bottom. After the word ordinance, should read except lot area, comma, are met. And then lastly, on page 4-7, the title, vacant or partially built, needs to be bolded. And that's it for Article 4.
Okay.
Article 5, appeals. That was not changed from the existing ordinance. Unless, Max, do you have any?
Just some, again, grammar and reference corrections. On page 5-1, under 5.1.2.1, as well as in 3 locations on 5.1.2.4 vacancy, it says Board of Select Board. We are taking out the board of portion.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, there's actually 4 spots in the vacancy spot. That has it.
Yep.
And then on page 5-2, 5.1.4.1.2, conflicts in this ordinance, that's the third from the bottom. It should read Article 1, Section 1.5. Lastly, or I'm sorry, not lastly. On page 5-3, although this will probably be 5-2 for some, this is the bottom of 5.1.4.2 on administrative appeals. We're taking out C Article 11B2 variance appeals and instead replacing it with C Rule 80B of the main rules of civil procedure. That's just the state law saying once the appeal is done, they can go to court if it's not enforced.
Okay.
And then under 5.1.4.4 to grant variances, the last sentence or last line, we are removing Article 11 and putting in Section 5.2.
Okay.
And then on 5-4, 5.3.1, undue hardship. I believe the U and H weren't capitalized, so we are capitalizing those. And we are also capitalizing the O in ordinance. That's in the middle of line 2. When strict application of the ordinance to the petitioner. And then page 5-5, item 5.3.4, variances floodplain management. The S in state law needs to be capitalized. Next is on page 5-7, item 5.4.1.5, notification of town officials. By the way, if someone needs me to slow down, just feel free to say so.
No, this is good.
On the last line, it should read within 30 days of the request. I believe that is all I have for Article 5.
Article 6. A couple things I just want to mention right up front. In the district descriptions, we took the district descriptions from the comp plan, and you'll notice recommendations. They should not have been put in there. That was just cut and paste by, and that just comes out. That doesn't.
Oh, that was my favorite part.
Well, you have to go to the comp plan for that part.
Well, that was actually one of my big questions is why are those only recommendations and not something more definitive in terms of, because I think those are, I mean, well, as you know, Bill, as most of us here know, from the planning board perspective, having sort of guidance of what the intent behind these are is pretty valuable.
They're not, it's not ordinance language, and they were never intended.
Okay.
So those come out.
All right.
And then The use table was updated. There were a number of new uses placed into the table or matrix. The committee also made sure that definitions were provided for all the major uses. There were a couple of things that were nuanced. Agriculture small, agriculture large. The same thing with event centers. There's event centers minor, event centers major. We also scaled campgrounds small, campgrounds large. Most of this came about due to experience from the planning board over the years. And also there was discussion about how we should review the particular types of activities. I'm trying to go through. That's basically, it is the use tables were updated. Many were unchanged in terms of the description of the use. Another major change was that the use table in the shoreline zoning form district was taken out of that section and put into this section, so that if someone is looking for what's allowed in an area that a piece of land that includes both shoreline zoning and another district, they can find it in one place. And then the dimensional chart at the end, we did not change. So that remains the same from the existing ordinance. And there's just a note in here that specific dimensional requirements pertaining to shoreline zoning, you have to go into Article 11, shoreline zoning, because there's a lot of nuances there in terms of setbacks and what could be done in the setback area, etc. So in a nutshell, that's what's here.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
I have a question. When you format this, will the headings all get on the top of each page of each chart?
Yeah. There'll be some formatting. We may probably, we could also put the key at the bottom of the pages too on that, just to make it easier for people to know what PB is, CL or CEO and whatever.
So another question I have, for instance, rural area, it says an accessory apartment is allowed. And then under residential, I'm wondering why an accessory unit is not allowed. A two-family is allowed, but why? What would be the difference between?
Barbara,
is it not allowed in residential?
Barbara, you're gonna have to keep that.
Oh, okay. So I'm looking at the uses for in rural. It says that. God, where was it? It was in 6.8. These are not.
That should be page 6-21 for people. 6-21 if you're talking about 6.8. Barbara, are you talking about the schedule of dimension?
Okay. And an accessory apartment is allowed in residential, but is it not allowed in a rural area? According to this chart?
Accessory apartments are allowed in all districts, except for the industrial.
Okay. Okay, so it's not, but it's not, when you say rural uses, when you're giving the guidance of rural uses, this is as a for instance, basically, I mean, basically how those categories were come up with.
Where are you looking? Where are you looking at for rural district and not allowing the apartment?
I'm not. I'm just seeing that accessory apartment is not included in the rural area.
Go down further, Barbara.
On page 6-8, under residential uses, accessory apartment is allowed in all districts with CEO approval, except for industrial. So that's why we're confused.
So it's not,
Okay.
accessory apartment is not categorized as a,
Residential only.
under residential, but it's allowed in the residential districts. I think that's the way those work.
I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, I'm just
On
kind
six,
of
I
curious
think,
how
yeah,
items.
Barbara's talking about in 6-7 lists rural uses. So an accessory apartment is not listed as a rural activity.
Oh,
You see what I'm saying? That's the,
yeah, the chart's divided up into categories, so all the residential type activities are in one, and the more predominant rural uses are in another. And just like in the commercial uses are allowed, some in the commercial area. That's just a matter of making it easier to navigate the chart, that's all.
Okay, got it.
That's what I didn't catch, Barbara, I'm sorry.
So if I,
Yep, go ahead.
no, Barbara, did you have a question?
Nope, all set.
Going through the changes, as Bill said, if you see recommendations and then a dash, all that is gone, no matter what category that is in. On page 6-2, on 6.6.3 industrial district, in that sentence, industrial district should be capitalized. Under 6.6.4 residential district, on the second line, and to protect residential property values, not properties values. And then, one second. Oh, I'm trying to find where it all went. There it is. Okay. Page 6-3, item 6.6.5. The title should read Route 1 spelled out, Commercial A District. And then in that first sentence, or first line, the route and A between commercial and district should both be capitalized. Next, item 6.6.6, the good one. Route 1, again, should be spelled out, O-N-E. And then in the second line, it should read, allow business and light industry / manufacturing. I think the I is capitalized, that needs to be lowercase. And then item 6.6.7, rural district. The third line, the sentence that starts midway through should read the rural district with rural district capitalized. And then the third line from the bottom in the middle of the sentence, which contains should be removed. And it's a new sentence. Permitted uses include open spaces, agricultural uses, et cetera, et cetera. Next, on page 6-4, item 6.6.8, Rural Village Business District. It should read the purpose of the rural village business, adding village there. And then the second line from the bottom, Waldoboro's, apostrophe S, historic rural, lowercase. Next, 6.6.11, shoreline districts. At the end of the first line, the M in mandatory should be lowercase. And then on 6-5, 6.6.11.1.2, patterns of uses, the U should be capitalized. And then 6.6.11.5.1, wildlife habitat. This is the last paragraph before the chart. 1, 2, 3, 4. The starting at the fourth line from the bottom, after M, D, I, F, and W, the words "or the department" will be removed. Next, on page 6-6, item 6.6.11.7, Commercial Fisheries / Maritime Activities District. Second line from the bottom. It should read indicated in table 6.7.5. We are removing the and of. On page 6-7, between CEO and PB, we're adding the following key item, CP, which will read uses requiring approval from the code enforcement officer and town planner with the requirements of Article 3 of this ordinance. Next, we have, do you want me to also go through the new uses as well, or?
Just the ones that were changed.
Okay. Next, on page 6-10, this is the third use from the top. Brewery.
Max, excuse me for a second. I'm going to back you up.
Yep.
The addition of CP.
Yes.
Of all the things we've gone through, that's the only one of some substance that we've seen. Why did that come in so late in the game?
Well, actually, so CP has actually been added on early. The reason I'm saying that was new adding in there is because I didn't include it in there in the beginning of in the last draft from Labor Day. CP is actually found in the key on page 6-14.
Okay, and it's always been in the matrices as well, right?
Right, it's all throughout the matrices.
Yeah, a number of other places.
Okay,
Right.
Got it. Thank you.
I guess I could have been more clear on that item.
No, but this is very helpful as well as the new Article 3, just in terms of logistics and helping the process. I think, we talked a number of times in the board about issues that that were previously just the CEO, didn't involve the planner and the ability to bump stuff to the planning board. So I think all of that is a good addition.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the intent. Hopefully it will be a good addition to the town. So going back to where I was, page 6-10, this is the third use from the top. Breweries, distilleries, and vineyards. We're adding in there a backslash wineries. We'll explain it more when we get to the definitions. This was something that was realized last meeting.
So is there a reason why that's not so that's not allowed in the residential area? Those are not? Just curious what the
correct.
Rural is okay. Yeah,
Rural
I get that. That makes sense. Historic village, it's not allowed. Okay.
Yeah, a good chunk of these aren't going to be allowed. The more open space ones aren't going to be in the historic village, more because there's not that much density in a good chunk of it. Same reason why some uses were just removed from downtown. It's not because we don't want it there. It's just, could it really be there is the question. So
okay.
Next is on page 6-11. This is the fifth one from the top. Farmers market. First of all, remove the apostrophe from the S. And next, it is planning board across the board, except in the industrial district. And then on page 6-13, this is just before industrial uses. Woodworking is combined as one word. Then page 6-15. This is number 3. We're removing subsection 11.5. I'm sorry, we're removing subsection 11.5, table of land uses.
Okay.
That cross can go all the way up. Should say uses proposed in the shoreline district are also subject to the requirements contained in Article 11, shoreline. Next, on page 6-18, this is the first use at the top, individual private campsites. Under commercial, fisheries, maritime activities, that will be left blank. So it will be prohibited in the commercial, fisheries, and maritime activities district. And then, I think this is the last item I have on 6-18. This is the last use from the bottom. Industrial will be prohibited under commercial, fisheries, and maritime activities district. And that, I believe, is the news. Article 7.
All right, Article 7, general performance standards. I just want to highlight noise has been expanded, that the performance standards for noise and lighting has been updated. These have been issues that have come in front of the planning board a couple of times. So there's some prescriptive or clearly laid out standards for noise, and we beefed up the lighting standards to eliminate glare in particular, and making sure that most of the light is shed downward onto the site instead of to the side and to the sky.
All right, terms of changes. First page, 7.1.2.3, Route 1 buffer. The end of line 2 and start of line 3 should read, and for the redevelopment and expansion of existing commercial properties. Item 7.1.2.5, visual impacts. The end of the first line should read, planning board determines it necessary to minimize visual impact. Next.
Could I interrupt for a second, Max?
Yep.
So relative to all these reference changes and typos,
Right.
and we're now in Article 7 and we have 15 articles. How much more of this do we have? Because we've spent an hour, which probably 3/4 of it were on these kinds of things, which are kind of pro forma. And I know the board needs to vote on them, so I want to make sure that we're careful that we understand those. But I'm a little hesitant to spend, how much time do you anticipate is left on just those kind of items?
Scott, most of the changes are pretty minor.
We can talk more when like a whole word is changed.
Yeah. There's we had to. There were a number of changes we had to make the article numbers correspond.
Right.
Like adding a comma. If we could just concentrate on the more substantial changes.
Yeah, I'm not even talking about where like every individual comma was added or anything like that.
Right, but typos and capitalizations and deleting and art references and things like that, and slight deletions for clarity.
Yeah.
I would have preferred to have had time to have seen all those in the version that I looked at through, but since we don't, I'd hate to take everybody's time for going through the whole rest of the 15 articles. So
what changes the intent of the change? If there's an intention change, then that should be explained, but I don't think we need to have the grammar explained to us or the references.
Yeah, it's just taking too much time. I was not aware of how much of it there was.
So I mean, I won't add references, what's being changed, or
just the things that affect the meaning of
the language.
Yeah, language. Yeah.
All right. All right. In that case, page 7-12, item 10.4, archaeological historic sites. That whole paragraph is being removed. That was misplaced. Instead, we're adding in the following additional article. This is 7.10.8 emergency services. 7.10.8.1 water. It will read, applicants may be required to demonstrate access to a sufficient water supply that may be used by the Waldoboro Fire Department during a fire-related emergency. And then item 7.10.8.2, accessibility. Applicants may be required to install a lockbox as specified by the Waldoboro Fire Department. I don't know why that wasn't included in the ordinance that was submitted before Labor Day, but that was something that Chief Smelter does want included just for the fire department moving forward.
Max, where is 10.4 going if it's not going to be here?
I don't even know where that was supposed to be. I think that was just
that came out of somewhere,
but that wasn't supposed to be here. I think
that came out of somebody else's ordinance.
Where that might have been in the subdivision portion.
It could have been, yeah.
Right, because there still should be a provision to direct people to that, correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Scott?
There still should be some reference to archaeological historic sites relative to planning board approval, correct?
For any proposed land use activity requiring site plan or subdivision.
I don't remember seeing it in Article 10.
I don't know where it could have. I mean, could we just?
Yeah, hopefully.
I mean, Bill, that might have just been something that was supposed to be in the archaeological portion of the general performance standards.
Right, section in the current land use ordinance, it's 4.3.
I couldn't find it.
In the current land use ordinance?
Right, in the current general performance standards in the current land use ordinance is historic village district architectural standards. And there's a whole section there.
But that should still be in the ordinance.
Yeah, yeah.
The new ordinance.
Right, but it needs to be, we need to make sure it's in the general performance standards section.
Right. The historic village architectural standards are page 7-3. I mean, Bill, is there any issue if we were to just remove 10.4 to the?
I don't know, Max. I couldn't find it.
If we can try and go through the rest of the items, I can quickly do a search of it just when we have more time.
Sure.
So we'll get to that.
I seem to remember discussing that at some point.
Yeah, I can't.
I'll find it.
You know, opening up a can of worms.
I'll try and find it in the original ordinance, but in the meantime, if you want to go forward,
All right.
To Article 8.
Article 8. Article 8, we pulled out of the standards all the environmental sections and put them in one place, like roads and transportation issues. So most of these standards have not been changed at all. What we did do was in the stormwater sections, we have a stormwater plan options. There's an applicant, we have 3 ways of meeting the stormwater management standards. They would prepare a plan in conformance with the stormwater management for Maine best management practices. They would prepare a plan that's in compliance with the DEP Chapter 500. That typically occurs on larger applications. They'll prepare the plan in accordance with that. And then for residential and smaller commercial projects, they can also conform to the low impact development standards. And each of these, we would have an appendix available at the code office and the planner, and also on the web page that would guide people through this process. The LID standards, low impact development standards, are designed specifically for smaller developments, particularly 1 and 2 family dwellings and commercial developments that are relatively small. But you would, the applicant would pick and choose which option that they would use. The only one that would be limited to the size of their development would be the last one, the LID standards. That's designed, again, like I said, purposely just for small developments.
Good, that's good. This is good to put this. This is good. This is helpful.
Yeah, this gives us some options. I know the planning board struggled sometimes with the stormwater standards, and this way we're using the state standards where applicable, EMP standards, and then also the LID ones for the smaller ones. Because remember, we're with our application review, the same kind of application requirements are subject to everything that goes on in the town. So some of our standards now are geared to account for the smaller type items, and this is one of those particular examples.
So in terms of changes, first one is 8.1.1.2. This is the last sentence or the last line. 2- and 10- should have year after it. I just wanted to say that because that was the land use committee's thing. 8.2.2 at the bottom of page 8-1. At the end of the last line, site plan review and subdivision is being removed. So it should be prepared for applications. And on page 8-6, the chart, the left side should read average slope of land between disturbed area and normal watermark. And that is it for Article 8. And I also have found where archaeological / historic sites was.
Oh, where was
that was a specific performance standard. So I think what the intention was to put it under general performance.
All right.
Just to, because we don't prove historic sites.
All right. So we need to number that.
Should we put it under the historical standards, or should we make it its own as?
Make it its own standard.
So that will be 7.10.9.
All right.
Is that fine with the planning board members?
I like it. I think it should be there. So, yeah.
I'm glad you found it, Max, because I couldn't find it.
And we're not touching the language at all. It'll still say requiring site plan or subdivision review and all that.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. That's it.
Yeah, Article 9, roads, parking, driveways, and traffic access. All we did is we collected everything that dealt with access, parking, road design, and put it into one place. So if you're building a road or looking for parking standards, you find it under one article. We did not make any substantive changes to the materials in this section. Max?
I get the feeling you're trying to make this easier for us and the applicants.
Oh no, Scott believes we have a devious plot that we're trying to make this easier.
Well, actually, we're trying to make it easier for us, Scott.
Yeah.
Easier to find stuff.
Scott, I just went through the yellow changes in 9, and as Bill says, they moved one section on dead-end streets and cleaned up some language. That's about it.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, at the top, it should be Article 9, for
Instead of
example.
section, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not going through every single thing, like removing under site plan or select board instead of board of selectmen, like, I'm not
Right.
going through all that, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and I'm also not just correcting where the references are, correct?
Correct.
Just on that one.
And in this, Max, in this section, low volume, medium volume, and high volume, they're defined in definitions?
They are defined.
No, they're defined in the section itself.
For,
Okay.
Yeah, if you
Right,
look-
sections,
Down
yeah,
below.
9, yeah, first page, 9, yeah.
different ones given there. All right, Bill, where did you say they could find it?
9.5, page 9.5.
I assume you're talking about,
Low
okay,
volume,
at the very
medium
top. Yeah, 9.2.9.
Right.
Okay.
And also 9.1 also. Page
9.2.9, low volume.
If you go to page 9.1 also, they define vehicle trips associated with each type of driveway.
Okay,
Yeah, 9.2.3.1 defines low volume, then 0.2 is medium, 0.3 is high on page 9.1.
okay.
So moving on from that, 9.2.13.1 should be subdivision and planning board review. Then I'm not making those types of corrections. On 9.2.14.3 solar energy, that paragraph is being removed and we are replacing it with the items from 9.2.14.10 dead end streets. We're just moving that over there so we don't have to have everything shift down one number. And then, and all the references were corrected. Correcting the select board language on 9-12. And so that's it for Article 9.
Okay.
And Article 10, specific performance standards. We added a couple of things dealing with agriculture, related activities. We have them defined as small or large scale activities based on vehicle trips. We also have a section here on campgrounds. We talk about small campgrounds and large campgrounds, as I mentioned in the use chart. So we have some language dealing with how we distinguish between the two. And they're based on the number land available and the maximum number of sites for small and large. The committee felt that we should distinguish in size for the small and the large campgrounds. And, also for event centers, there's some specific. That's a new section. Most of the other large sections, like manufactured housing parks and things like that, were not changed. Same thing with the communication towers weren't changed. We took out, it was the, not methadone clinics, but the marijuana dispensary section that was removed. But the highlights there are the campgrounds, large and small, agricultural, related activities, small scale and large scale, predominantly based on trips per day, and the event centers, minor and major.
What page is event centers on?
I'm sorry?
What page is event centers on?
Oh, event centers is on the back, hang on.
Should be like the last page on that, 10-40, well,
Hold on.
10-43, I believe. Nope.
is, bear with me.
10-42.
10 dash, yeah, I have 10-43. It's section 10.30. Oh, and I forgot to mention food truck standards also.
Right. And is freestanding commercial kiosks, is that new also?
No,
No, that's been there.
Really? Okay.
we just never
That's
get
been
any.
there for about 8 years or so.
Oh, hmm.
We just don't have any in town, I don't think. No, we don't.
So I want to call attention to the event center section for the board. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read that thoroughly, because it's certainly something we've been dealing with the last couple of years.
Can I quickly go through the changes before we get to that topic?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just, I'll be quick on it. So first is on page 10-2, item 10.5.1.3, liability insurance. That should be $1 million. Next is page 10-4, item 10.7.1.1.1, small campgrounds. The second sentence should read, all campsites or structures. Next is page 10-5, item 10.7.3.2, water and sewer. The second to last line should read, no case shall less than 2 toilets and 2 lavatories provided for every 10 camping and tent sites. In no case shall less than 2 toilets and 2 lavatories be provided. I'm sorry.
Where was Polly when you were writing that? Is that a smooth sentence?
Be provided for every 10 camping and tent sites. Next is page 10-6, item 10.8.3.4, liability insurance. The second and third line should read, extraction site shall provide evidence to the code enforcement officer of a $1 million insurance policy against liability, and it goes on from there.
How is that value determined?
I believe that was just, how was the $1 million liability insurance set? I think that was something the committee decided.
Yeah, it was more in current with standard practices out there for
And what lawsuits
the liability
entail,
insurance, yeah.
This
Yeah,
is for
these references go back maybe 15, 20 years, the existing ones, so.
Yeah, I can see that for the junkyard and a major facility like that, but I mean, 1,000 cubic yard borrow pit is hardly a big business, and $1 million might be a lot for somebody to pony up for something like that.
Yeah.
Makes it worth suing.
Yeah, that one seems tough.
And then,
Well, before we just move on from that, I think Jim had a good point. I don't know what's
Well, no.
your reaction to that, Jim.
you're fine going on. I'm just trying to see if there were any more
Oh, okay.
changes. But yeah, go ahead.
I think our thoughts when we were doing it was that $1 million insurance policy is not that huge for a commercial endeavor. I mean, most people have something close to that on their homes, just, you know, a liability type thing.
Yeah. Earth moving topsoil. Yeah.
Yeah, Bill, you said it's sort of common practice to expect that amount now anyway, even for a small business like this.
Yeah, that was what, that seems to be the typical.
So what is removal of greater than 1,000 cubic yards of material prohibited? 10.8.1.1
1,000 cubic yards.
says the removal of less than.
Well, because we have it under 1,000 cubic yards. So if someone wants to,
What's
Right.
well, he's looking at the land use district.
10,
Land use district.
Well, Scott, can you repeat
Tell me
it?
where you're,
page 10-5, under 10.8 excavation borrow pits, which is what we're talking about here relative to the insurance, right? It says 8.1.1, less than 1,000 cubic yards. The removal of less than 1,000 cubic yards of material from any lot in a 12-month period.
Got to read the preceding sentence in 10.8.1, Scott. The
Shall be
following
allowed
earthwork
without the
activities.
approval. Oh, I see.
Yeah, okay, without approval. So it's a small one, they don't need to come to us. If it's bigger than 1,000, they
Yeah.
come to us.
And if it's permit required, so does the insurance apply?
Regardless of the size.
Yeah.
That's the way I read it.
what's the question?
They're just reading the section very
Oh.
quickly.
Well, if it's a sort of standard thing and the committee talked about it, it doesn't seem a barrier. I'm open to anybody else's. What is the
If
board
somebody
think?
comes up and says it's a hardship, we can always give them a variance, right?
Yeah, that's possible. Yep. Is everybody fine with that on the board and
Well,
citizens and select board members?
if it's less than,
Yeah, opinion.
it doesn't need a permit.
Right.
So they won't require the liability insurance. Right.
And I think that's what they were.
Oh, all right. I didn't catch what they were.
Okay.
So does that answer that section?
I think so.
Yep.
Okay.
Next item is on page 10-25. This is the second paragraph of item 10.19.4, open space requirements. The second line from the bottom, we're removing the following words: pursuant to Article 10, Section 10.18. I have multifamily dwellings, preservation in perpetuity, and we're just combining the two sentences into one. So it should say, such land may be included as a portion of one or more large parcels on which dwellings are permitted, provided that a conservation easement or a declaration of covenants and restrictions is placed on such land, and provided that the planning board approves such configuration of the open space.
Okay.
That's a reference. That's a reference. Here. Page 10-38, item 10.28.3 should say planning board review application, not site plan. And then for page 10-40, starting on page -41, for the requirements under 10.29.2, I'm just adding some subheadings after a recommendation from Sanford Crane. It'll go state certified, followed by parking, followed by waiting area. And then the last item before event centers will be titled limit. And then page 10-42 for 10.30.2, the first change is it will say minor event centers instead of temporary. And then the fourth requirement or standard from the top will say amplified music and loudspeakers. And then two below it, frequency of events. The last sentence will say the total number of events per calendar year is limited to 12. And then lastly, for 10.30.3, the title will say major event center. And same change, it will say amplified music and loudspeakers are limited. And that is all I have. So Barbara wanted to speak about the event centers.
Yeah, I mean, that's a new description for us. Having a small, possibly farm accessory business type of thing. It limits it to 12 events per year, larger events. But what I was reacting to is that since this isn't maybe an accessory business, not a big deal, not a huge part of people's businesses, the fact of having to put all music inside a building and not like under a tent or something for some event seemed a little harsh to do that. And I thought that, and especially if a business is starting out, I mean, ultimately, I'm sure they'd love to have a building big enough to host weddings or parties or music. But anyway, and I was thinking that if it is a problem for neighbors or whatever, there must be some method of having the planning board has some discretion, like if it's in a really large lot, or we limit music to a lower number of events per year or something like that. Music, events with music specifically. There must be some way that we can, open up the options for this kind of event center.
I mean, it basically, the one that came to mind for me, the Topsail Farm and Waldo Theater outdoor movies.
Mm-hmm.
Says they can't do that anymore under that ordinance.
They're not event centers.
Yeah, and assuming that would have happened, they would have been asked to have their barn moved into the rural district of their property lot. That's the first change. But
you can still have stuff under a tent in somewhere. So
Yeah.
whether it's rural or not, or you're in 150 acres or whatever, this is just saying you can't have music at all. It could be a time limit at 8 o'clock at night or something, or there must be some way to temper the effect on neighbors.
That's why we included the word amplified music. So if someone wants to play a basic acoustic guitar or something, there's no harm, no foul, but the moment they plug that into a loudspeaker, that does become a prohibited use.
Right, and I'm struggling with that. I mean, you're allowing 100 vehicles and quite a few people, and one person with acoustic guitar is not going to entertain that. I struggle with this. Why someone wouldn't have a tent and couldn't? I mean, especially with COVID. I guess I'm struggling overall with the minor event centers, which are small scale and maybe seasonal, have all these restrictions, and then a full event center, part of a hotel or a restaurant, has very little in the way of restrictions on it. I'm not sure I understand that discrepancy. The minor ones and small ones have a lot of restrictions, and the major ones don't. I get it.
Part of that reason will be that minor event centers are allowed in the village, whereas a major event center is not. So this is keeping in mind that the minor event center will be in the village area. So for example, on-street parking is prohibited. That's a concern because this would include Jefferson Street, this would include Kaler's Corner, part of Bremen Road, part of Main Street, West Main Street as well. But that was just part of the logic of those restrictions.
Okay, but that I understand that. That makes sense. But then that's a district restriction, not because if you are seasonal and small and principal use such as a farm or as an accessory, you're not in the village district and there's no need for those restrictions. I'm just wondering if that is whether this is characterized correctly. If you were to say, if that was to say event centers in the village district, and then if that was the heading for 10.30.2, and then the heading for 10.30.3 was event centers in other zones, then I can, you know.
Yeah, it's funny because if you have a restaurant or some facility like that in the village district, you can park on the street. So maybe event centers just shouldn't be in the village.
That's a part. I think that the reason for some of these restrictions were twofold. Some of the reaction we got from the existing operations that are similar to event centers before, we have this category, and the reaction we're seeing in other communities. There typically is a considerable amount of public pushback when these activities are proposed, particularly in residential or rural areas. Jefferson, China had a couple. I mean, they all seem to evoke a lot of neighborhood reaction. Traffic is some of it, but noise is a large one. And we have the same thing going on in Bangor and also Portland too, because that's much different scale, completely different scale. But again, the issue is noise and the transfer of noise into neighboring properties.
And in many cases, it's far beyond the neighboring.
Oh yeah.
If they use amplifiers,
Yeah,
because technology can make it enormous, and it's been all over the press.
Yes, I understand. I guess I would have, like, for example, some of the breweries, and Odd Alewives has outside music on occasion. Just because it's amplified doesn't need to be loud. Doesn't mean it is, it's not going to be. But
there's sound restrictions already in town, right? And there's also times we have different things that have to be stopped at certain times of night, like signage, and I mean, there's all kinds of things that we put time limits on.
I guess what I'm looking for is, why don't you give us a proposal? What would you like to see in terms of the sound restrictions?
And these other restrictions that are in minor but aren't in major, because for example, the first one, limit is total of 100 vehicle trips per event. That's to help distinguish the two between minor and major, just because of traffic impact. Driveway access shall be designed to accommodate vehicles entering and exiting the site with respect to site distance. I think that could be added to major events as well. Road serving the site can safely accommodate the anticipated traffic from the special event. Should be minor events there. That could be added. I'll skip the music for a moment. Venue site, including the parking area, must be screened. That's actually in major event as well. Frequency events, again, that's to distinguish between minor and major. On-street parking is prohibited. Parking areas and outside gathering areas must be. I feel that's just a repeat of that. Oh no, parking areas, I'm sorry. That can be added. No event shall exceed 8 hours in duration, excluding setup and breakdown in a calendar day. And well, the all applicable food is in both, but that's what's in the minor event centers.
I think I would add, I know in Portland, I know it's a different situation, but there's a decibel level that these events can go. I'm not sure what exactly
We have that in our noise.
Steve, you have it. So if they go over it, then I mean people are there to measure it. So maybe something reasonable.
Yeah, that we already have.
Just have someone to monitor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would have two. I think that section, the music and loudspeakers are limited to building interiors should be just stricken. If we're looking for simplicity, if we really want to, if we're really going on editing this, we're not gonna finish tonight, which maybe we won't, but I would strike that. And I also would strike the major event center where it says, is it a principal use or part of a hotel and or restaurant use? Doesn't make any sense to me either. Why are you making you're dividing it at, because a major event center might be something that has nothing to do with a hotel or restaurant. I don't understand why that's there.
So just strike that last part and just say event center is a principal use.
Right, event center is a principal use, sure.
Okay. And you're saying
So
remove the amplified music from both minor and major?
Or just
yeah, I think there are other ways to handle that, but I understand that there could be complaints, but go ahead, Barbara.
Yeah, what about amplified music is limited to 3 events per year and ending at 9 p.m.
Yeah, that gets some of those things are hard to enforce. You might put, you could eliminate the noise, you could eliminate that completely. Music and loudspeakers limited to building, you just eliminate that. Or you could set a limit and music on the exterior shall not go beyond a certain time.
That's fine. I can live with that.
Yeah, so I can live with that too. I think a time limit is best, and because I don't think the number of events is particularly. Then you're putting a, I don't.
Difficult.
Yeah.
You could just say music.
Music and loudspeakers are limited to. Or
music on the outside music is may not extend beyond 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, something like that.
Is that for both minor and major, or?
Yeah, we do it for both. Is that acceptable? Something like that?
Yeah, as long as that covers the kind of time frame that say outdoor movies like what Tops the Farm has done and other places like that might want to do that, how late a movie would run.
I think you need to say 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
And does the town have a sound ordinance?
Yes.
Yes, there is that in general performance.
And I would just reference that the sound levels have to be in accordance with the Waldoboro sound ordinance and must finish by 10 p.m.
Well, if you're going to, just rely on our noise ordinance, then just take that out completely, because they're subject to that anyway.
Yeah, the value of having some reference here, Bill, is it brings attention to it when they pull the permit and when they're looking at what's required. So I think there is value in making reference to the fact that sound has to be contained and controlled. Otherwise, it's not mentioned at all.
I think
this is just outside music, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm happier with that. I think it's more reasonable.
So what's on the table, Matt? Do you want to repeat?
So I'm clear on this. For both minor and major event centers, removing amplified music and loudspeakers are limited to building interiors. Replacing it with outdoor music is prohibited after 10 p.m. for both. Correct?
Yeah. Is that
good?
Well, what if it's non-amplified?
This is just outdoor music.
Well, bagpipes. Well, I'm seriously, they're 130 decibels, and
I'm sorry.
I'm just saying that Jim's idea of simply referencing outdoor music is limited by the some way of just referencing the section regarding noise in
Decibel
the,
sound.
How about outdoor?
It's a standard practice for restaurants or places that have music to either prohibit outdoor music or limit the time.
How
That's a
about-
very standard way of doing it.
How about outdoor music defaults to the general performance noise standards after 10 p.m. That way, the noise outdoor music has its own category, and then once 10 p.m. hits, it goes back to the town's default standards.
Perfect. I like it, Max.
Would that work, Bill?
Yeah, that's a possible. Yeah. Okay.
But they, in other words, they can continue to play music, but they must abide by the level. That means they could go to 3 in the morning and still be pretty loud.
Right.
But then they have
There is a limit.
then they have to follow the decibels.
You measure at the property line. If you're going to do that, either do one of two things: outdoor music, you limit cutoff time, or you just make a reference, as was proposed, to subject to noise standards contained in Article 7. Yeah.
Right.
yeah, I guess I would default to outdoor music, like the way you phrase it, outdoor music limited by the section, Waldeboro Noise Standards section, whatever.
Yeah.
I like that because it's not the music that's the problem, it's the volume.
Right.
So outdoor music is limited by the noise standards.
Or you could just say, you don't even have to say music.
Noise.
And activities are subject to meeting article noise standards. That's all.
I
Yeah,
like
but they test the noise at your boundary. And if you're in a 2-acre lot doing music, or if you're in the middle of a 100-acre lot doing music, your boundary, I mean, I think we should just have a time. Flat, stop.
Actually, no one's going to test this until after the fact, because the police will get a call. So,
Right.
I mean, if you could just say, you could just have one of the standards subject to noise ordinance requirements, period.
Because if somebody's coming in to get a permit for this.
Right.
No, this is an allowed use, so they get a permit once, and then so there's not every event they don't get a permit.
Right.
Yeah.
They have to say what they're going to do to handle the noise at the planning board meeting.
Max, what is the town's ordinance for decibels? There's an actual number?
Yes. It would be,
from my readings of what's happened in Portland, is neighbors, literally, you have a device that measures decibel level. So if someone had an issue with this and they were abutting, they could get that little device out and say,
this is the noise.
This is the town said you can have 60 decibels, but it's 120.
Yes.
And then, then that's the end of the story. Right?
Well, they all got together.
That's right. That's right.
Week after week.
Right.
So to answer your question, on page 7-4, you'll find the decibel usage based on what the abutting use is. And it's separated by residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional. So if your neighbor is, a neighbor, he lives there, then the sound from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. is 55 decibels. And after 7 p.m., it's 45 decibels. But if you live in a commercial district, but if you live next to a business, then it's 65 decibels from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and 55 in the night.
So that's already here.
Right.
You can live in a home next to a commercial enterprise, right?
Right.
So you have to bear a different level of noise.
Right.
It's very confusing.
So for that section, we are saying the activities are subject to the noise standards
In section
...
Article 7.6.
Yeah.
Are there any other thoughts?
And we do that for both major
and minor? Yep.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of people living very close to Route 1A and to commercial 1A and 1B. They're going to be, if this should happen in that area, they're subjected to louder noises coming from these event centers.
Yep.
Is that fair?
Is there anything else done on event centers? We take out amplified music and loudspeakers, and we'll just put in
a reference to the noise standard.
Subject to noise standards in Article 7.0.
There's nothing else. That's all there is for Article 10 for my notes. And I think here on out, we're going to be a lot quicker.
Shoreland zoning, we because that was recently changed, we made no changes to it, with the exception of we took the chart and moved it into Article 6. But nothing else has changed.
Okay.
Let's see, that's a reference. And then I don't believe I have anything for this section. I do not. On to subdivision.
Good. I just did that one. So
Article 12 subdivisions, as you recall, the existing ordinance combined site review and subdivisions together. We separated them because they're in subdivisions. There's a lot of peculiarities that are different than just a regular site review. So we separated that out. The biggest change is that it gives us the ability to put in all the review criteria, which we take out of state statute. So that's right here and there in the ordinance. And those are the items that the planning board will use to determine if the subdivision meets the criteria. And we specified the hearing requirements, the notice requirements in state statute are different from subdivisions than other types of reviews. All the submission requirements are listed in here for preliminary or final plans. And then there's some particular standards that pertain to subdivisions like monuments, location of monuments, fire protection, subsurface disposals, and historic archaeological sites, things like that. As the planning board knows, is when they submit a subdivision plan, they have to show all wetland areas, all unique environmental features, wildlife habitat areas, floodplain areas, things like that. So this just separates it out. And so when the board is looking at a subdivision, it's kind of, this section kind of hones in on the specific requirements.
Bill, I have a question.
Sure.
On Article 12 on page 12.1, the review criteria for the planning board shall consider the following criteria before making and granting approval.
Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff to go over.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really technical. I will admit, I'm not a hydrologist, I'm not an environmental engineer, but how do we know what information we're getting from these people is in fact accurate and it's fair?
Well, two things. One is that's the submission requirements that come in, that they're done by the appropriate professionals. Right. The board also has the ability to ask for additional information or additional studies.
So if there's any issue, you can say.
Yeah.
And I've wondered, I've gone through this as best I could, but in some areas where professionals can disagree.
Well, that's why you could have an additional study done,
right,
to confirm or to supplement.
And who would the burden of that financial fall on?
That'd be on the applicant.
Okay.
That's struck me going through this. Anytime there's a situation, in fact, that was the argument about born, the word born. Will always be born by the applicant. So that it seems to me that was really clear.
Right, in 12.4.4.1, there's a section on additional studies and it spells that out.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if that could run into some financial burden for the people.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on the complexity of the subject.
Okay.
And I didn't have any changes for Article 12, other than basic references.
Great.
Yeah, as I say, it'll be a lot faster now.
Number
13.
Number 13 and 14, we have not changed. These come right out of the existing ordinance. Hazardous materials and waste and the wellhead overlay protection district.
Yep. And the only change is for Article 13. Every item should be 13 points, ... I don't know why I thought it was the other one. And all the references in it have been corrected. And 13.4.3, that's a title, so it's boldened. And that's it for those two articles. Now to definitions, which should be definitions with an S.
There is more than one.
There is more than one, technically.
There were some new ones.
Right. Anything that is underlined, that is a, all right, someone left. Anything that is underlined, that is a brand new definition. Sometimes we added those definitions in because it's a new use. Sometimes they were added in because we had the use, but we didn't have a definition for it. So we just made that adjustment.
Also tell Max that we pulled out the floodplain.
Right. A lot of these items that are crossed out are related to the floodplain management ordinance, which is going to remain in the floodplain management ordinance. And some of them also just referenced other definitions. So we just removed those. Like, for example, animal hospital, it says see veterinary hospital or clinic. So we just removed that and just made the necessary corrections that you've had. I think the only highlighted difference is, and I'm trying to burn through these very quickly. Let's see. Just need to quickly remember that is a reference that I need to correct. Well, 15-18, C backlot low, that's removed. And then I think the only thing left is just for vineyards. Oh no, I'm sorry. On page 15-27, restaurant drive-through should actually be restaurant fast food. Yes, Sarah.
I have a question about accessory apartment. On my copy, it looks like the sentence is not completed.
Let me flip back. Accessory apartment, independent dwelling unit. The accessory has a separate kitchen, heating, and yes, you're right. That is not a complete thing. Let me see if I have.
Good catch, Sarah. Blew right through that one.
I don't know why that was cut off. I think I have a spare earlier copy right here, so I can read out that definition.
Is that a new one?
Yes, here we go. It should read, an independent dwelling unit that has been added onto or created within a single family house. The accessory apartment has a separate kitchen, bathing, and sleeping areas from the principal residential building. don't know where it got X from.
Thank you.
Just going, so if that was that, so yeah, restaurant, that should be restaurant fast food. That's the two. Page 1529, the definition for shooting range was with the G's. I just moved that, so that's between shipping container and shopping center. And lastly, page 15-35, the definition for vineyard is adding /winery to it. And the full definition will read, a facility that ferments, ages, and bottles wine or cider using produce that could be cultivated on site.
That could be?
Correct.
Okay.
So it went back and forth with these two definitions.
Okay.
Because originally it was, I could probably find the original definition, but originally it was, you had to do the produce that was on site, but then we wanted to take that out because some might not grow on site.
Right.
But then last meeting, it was thought, well, we should include it because some wineries do have to grow on site. And so
sure.
That was just a.
So Susan's is the grammar expert and she's not here, but should that say that may be grown on site?
That could be another.
Yeah, we can change that to that.
Okay.
And just so the planning board members are aware, Susan did give me her grammatical suggestions throughout the ordinance. So in order to not spend more time on that, I will make those corrections, hopefully before the select board meeting.
Okay.
Just so we don't have to go through all that.
Okay.
None of them changed meanings.
No, it's just basic grammatical stuff.
Yeah. So anything else, Bill and Max, before we sort of open this up for discussion?
No.
So I would open the floor to questions and comments. We have a couple of select board members here and another committee member by Zoom, and Holly's here. So I'm just going to open it up to anyone who has anything to. I have a couple of things, but I'll save that and see if we go there anyway. Any questions or comments from anyone? Bob.
I just would like to say that you've done a lot of work. The committee's done a lot of work. Clearly, the effort shows through, and we want to express our appreciation for all they've done. They've dealt with some difficult issues and seem to have dealt with them in a balanced way, especially the input that you've gotten tonight from the planning board. So I say congratulations to everybody for an effort well made.
Thank you.
Well, I think Bill and Max were outstanding. They just helped keep us focused, and they were amazing. So thank you.
Leaders.
Thank you all.
I agree with all that. And I'm going to keep it open for others. I'm a bit confused about something. So I believe that it was that when we ran over this is going back to the use tables, and this would be page 618.
618.
Page 618, which is the use tables for the shoreland, land uses in the shoreland zone.
Mm-hmm.
And if I understand correctly, for the commercial fisheries maritime activities under industrial, it did say planning board 5 and that's been stricken.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay. So then under commercial, right above that, the line above that,
Yes.
under commercial fisheries maritime activities, it says PB5. So it's planning board approval with, if I can find the right page.
The condition is on page 6-20.
20, correct.
Functionally dependent.
Right.
Water dependent uses.
Water dependent uses. So what I don't understand is commercial is like retail sales. You know, the definition of commercial use is lands, building, or structures other than the home occupation for the which activities of production of income from buying, of selling, and selling of goods and services. And I don't understand how commercial use would be there in the, you know, I'm not sure it just doesn't make any sense to me. Why would that be functionally water dependent, and why commercial sales would be allowed?
Well, commercial would be allowed only to the extent that it's a functionally dependent, water dependent use. So it's a very narrow use.
Which, like what?
I guess I would, probably the easiest example would be is a wharf that takes in the fish, packages it and ships it out, or cleans it and ships it out, that kind of activity.
Okay.
Not a retail though,
And not
because that's not functionally water dependent. Not a restaurant, not a chandlery or selling marine accessories and goods. None of those are functionally water dependent. So it's fairly limited.
Okay. So but in that section 5, it says water dependent.
Yeah.
And there's no definition of water dependent other than that section. Because then there's water-oriented business, which is a commercial or industrial, which by its nature requires a shorefront location. So is that what is meant by that?
As far as the definition for functionally water.
Yeah, Scott, where can you cite where the water-oriented business is? Where you read that?
Under the definitions, 15-35 defines a water-oriented business. And then in 620, it's defining the commercial business that can be in the shoreland zone as needing to be functionally water dependent, which is not defined. A paper mill is a water dependent business. So
there's a definition for functionally water dependent uses in the definition section.
There is? Okay.
Oriented.
It's on page 15-12.
15-12.
Yeah, this comes right out of the shoreline zoning model.
No, not on.
Yeah, it's in it.
Not in mine.
Functionally water dependent uses.
Function. Oh, yes. 15-13.
Functionally water dependent uses.
It's between funeral home and golf course.
Yep. Got it.
Rather interesting.
I mean, this is the whole purpose of a commercial waterfront district.
Yes, except I'm still struggling with this is we're allowing commercial use, functionally water dependent uses, but not allowing industrial, but functionally water dependent uses includes industries dependent on waterborne transportation requiring large volumes of cooling or processing water. which is, I would think, personally, is the last thing I would want down at the Dutch Neck Landing, is large uses of water going in and out of the Madomic. You know, it's cross purposes here, because what it's saying is that commercial use is allowed, commercial being buying and selling products, and then, but saying it's functionally water dependent uses, then that definition allows industrial uses. And also allows large amounts of water going in and out of the shore dependent, but.
Well, the other thing that you need to consider is also in the commercial fisheries and maritime district, at the very beginning of it, it says it has to be compatible with the upland use of the zoning that's upland. So in my opinion, the upland use of both the Pine Street Landing and the Dutch Neck Landing is residential. Oh. So I don't think that any commercial use is really appropriate in that zone. You're not going to prohibit clammers because launching of boats by itself is not a commercial use.
Well, zoning wise, Dutch Neck is residential, but I believe Pine Street is either village or historic village.
Right, but those are both residential zones,
yeah.
Not
yeah.
Typically commercial.
Yeah, and so I do think that's a conflict, specifically too, because the previous page of the table on 617, limited residential aquaculture is allowed. And it doesn't, there's two definitions. There's one for aquaculture and there's a definition for land-based aquaculture. And on page 6 to 18, under commercial limited residential, it just says the number 10, which it says except for the commercial uses otherwise listed in this table. So that's implying that aquaculture is allowed in the limited residential area. And it doesn't discriminate between land-based aquaculture. For example, American Unagi, which is a large industrial facility having a lot of water going in and out, is in that industrial zone. It's sort of implying that because it's not discriminating between aquaculture and land-based aquaculture, I wouldn't want to infer that an operation like American Unagi would be allowed right on the shore.
But I don't think it's saying that.
No, because we don't have, we have land-based aquaculture distinct in the ordinance. We have the definition, we have that in the regular land use chart. So having it not in the shoreland chart means it's just prohibited in the shoreland zone.
So I missed, where is land-based aquaculture in the table that makes it allowed? In
the shoreland or the land use district?
Anywhere.
So you will find it on page 6 dash. Give me one moment here.
Oh, 6.7? No, agriculture, aquaculture.
It should be
commercial uses.
It is, yes, the bottom of 6-11, second from the bottom. Land-based aquaculture that is allowed in the rural district, the Route 1 districts, and the industrial district.
Got it. Okay, good. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that was differentiatable.
Yeah.
We wanted to make sure of that too, because of, as you said, we wanted to make a distinction between people harvesting from the river and an American Unagi type place.
Yep. So I guess my one question is, for the planning board approval in the commercial fisheries maritime activities, for a commercial activity that would be
Using the definition.
that would be functionally water dependent, which
Right.
also includes industrial activities. I'm not sure why we're trying to allow that and this is not from a planning board perspective, this is from a personal perspective.
Well, the word industrial infers some sort of processing happens. Commercial has to do with buying and selling and creating business. But a process is, you know, some things that are more scientific, such as, you know, rearing clams or clam seeding or whatever would be a process. So does that mean is that why it's the industrial is lingering in this language, Bill? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, for the purposes, you know, I mean, you know, there's some history behind these definitions. For the most part, the activities that we allow in these districts are, you know, what we would probably call typical maritime fishing activities. Boat building is allowed, but typically it's that portion of the boat building process that brings your boat into the water. The construction activity usually takes place, you know, inland or not necessarily on the shore. And then the industrial here is dependent upon waterborne transportation or requiring large volumes, cooling or processing water that cannot
reasonably be located or operated at an inland site.
At an inland site, yeah. On that. And usually the discretion is that if that facility could be located outside of the direct access to the water, then it should be. And very rarely do they need to be right on the water. Like the plant in Belfast or even American Economic. I mean, American Economic draws water from a well, but they discharge into the river. And that could be, you know, they don't necessarily have to be right there. So there is some leeway here. And typically,
well, but that's precise. I guess that's my concern, Bill, is the leeway. Because if you read functionally water dependent uses,
that, you know,
what's that?
We should define functionally water dependent strictly, you know, as the names implies. It has to. It cannot. You know, typically it means it cannot operate other than in this location.
Yes, but that is part of the definition that's in there on page 1513. My concern is the uses include, but are not limited to, commercial recreation, fishing and boating facilities, finfish and shellfish processing, fish-related storage, retail, wholesale fish marketing facilities, shipyards, boat building, marinas, navigation aids. But then it says industrial uses depending on waterborne transportation or requiring large volume of cooling or processing water that cannot be reasonably located or operated in an inland site. So this is saying that this is allowed, things that come under that description would be allowed in on the Dutch Neck Landing.
Well, because we struck the industrial use from that portion, the industrial use is dependent, that wouldn't happen now because that was stricken in the revised ordinance. It would be pretty much everything before that at this point.
But what is an industrial use then? If it's not shellfish processing or fish processing, what's an industrial use? Give me an example. What are we what are we striking?
Well, it would follow the industrial definition on page 15-17 for assembling, fabricating, finishing, manufacturing, packaging, or processing operations, including the processing of raw materials or the large-scale storage of flammable or explosive materials. And then it goes into uses that are not permitted and listed under hazardous materials, but those are what's prohibited.
So harvesting and drying seaweed on shore is not processing raw materials. Drying seaweed to ship, that's not processing raw materials.
Drying seaweed to dry on land or on the ship?
Drying, you harvest the seaweed, you bring it in and you dry it, and then you ship it off to wherever it's going. Because it's later to ship rather than delivering heavy seaweed inland to get processed. So
functionally water dependent is taking the sea vegetable from the boat to the shore, and then if you're going to process it or dry it, that can happen anywhere. That's not functionally water dependent.
It's a very, you've added a lot of expense to the business.
We have 2 seaweed factories that are not on the water currently in
Right.
town.
Yeah.
Right. So
They don't need to be there. Yeah.
So we're not adding a third one.
No.
So
No.
what are we trying to?
Functional dependent activity is taking the material from the boat to the shore. That's it. That's.
Okay.
Well, it's just that the word industrial has processing in the definition, and the word commercial does not.
What?
So, but I understand that the industrial, under the commercial, that the industrial in that zone has been, we're deleting that.
Right. Yeah.
So what are we trying to allow in the commercial fisheries and maritime activities in the shoreland zone? What commercial activity are we trying to allow, which is the reason for that to be not blank and prohibited from that zone?
The idea is just how it connects to the activities that are already occurring there, clamming, fishing, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
So
I don't think there's anything else because it's town-owned property.
It's a question. Everything that is happening at the landing currently can happen in a residential zone. There's
Which
nothing.
landing?
Excuse me?
Which landing? Pine Street or Dutch Neck?
Either, I think, but I know intimately Dutch Neck. I don't know all that happens at Pine Street. Right now, what happens at the Dutch Neck landing is that boats go in and out of there, and twice a year commercial boats get hauled or launched. That can happen in any zone. That can happen anywhere that's next to the river.
Well,
adjacent, if you look at the shoreland zoning map, adjacent to the Dutch Neck Commercial Fisheries Marine District is like a river resource or something where stuff is completely prohibited because they want to protect the river. So what is 50 feet? Why are we protecting adjacent to the landing and going to allow commercial stuff?
Vehicles go to the Dutch Neck landing too. What's called product is transported into those vehicles.
Correct.
Yeah. So I mean that's part of that activity that that we allow in those areas. It's not a structure that's there, but the vehicles go, to the the landing area.
Right.
Yeah. Right. I mean that's the character of that area.
I agree, but that also, I have friends who are lobstermen in Waldoboro, and they take their commercial, their lobsters off of their private dock in a residential area. Yeah. So it's just because we deemed this commercial fisheries, right now, it's kind of irrelevant that it's commercial fisheries. It could be just the shoreland district because there is nothing happening there that couldn't happen in any other zone.
Right, and you would prefer that it stayed that way in perpetuity, right?
Absolutely, for a number of reasons. Because going to protect the river, why are we imposing stricter rules to the adjacent property, but not this one? That seems crazy.
I think that a decision like this is more than tonight's meeting and the select board meeting to change it. I think to change a possible future, to prohibit a possible future that we don't know about yet would be a shame. And it would, since 3 people on this committee tonight are members of the Dutch Neck residential community, I don't think it would be the way to handle it.
I think Barbara, because it's a town-owned property, this discussion has to occur, you know, with the select board. Yeah, you know, it needs to be a joint discussion.
So with
Well,
this,
and I think that's part of, like, frankly, that's part of my issue with this. If this property, I mean, we're not really talking about the landing now. We're talking about the property next to the road and the landing. And the town happens to own that because it was given in lieu of taxes, so the town owns it. If this were a person that owned that property, we wouldn't be having this discussion.
I don't know if that's germane to this discussion.
Well,
I think if you're looking at, what we're looking at is, from what I'm gleaning, is that you would prefer this to be rezoned or restricted further. And I think that discussion needs to occur on a larger format with the planning board or other interested parties and the select board also.
I think that I personally, I'm fine with it being the commercial fisheries because there's other uses that can be there, the nature, the interpretive nature thing and aquaculture, things like that. But I think commercial uses, even if they're water dependent, it's not appropriate because it's the upland use is a residential zone.
Well, this has been, you know, the other thing too is that this has been, you know, we didn't change this in shoreline zoning. This was been on the books for a long time now.
Oh, absolutely. But it just happens that we're redoing the regulations now. So now's the time to discuss it.
Yeah. And
well, I think the principle of this and the way that this is, the way these are circularly referenced with the definitions of functionally water dependent uses, that we're now striking the industrial part, but the commercial part is okay. It's not very clear, and it's requiring that the operation need to use large amounts of water, you know, and/or access to the shore. That I think makes it confusing as well. That I think we ought to encourage activities, whatever they are, that are. We don't want to have it be open and have not a reasonable way to refuse a business that might use a large amount of water that we would have concerns about from a preserving the medomic standpoint.
Wouldn't that be a state decision since it's below the high water line kind of thing? Any kind of water
I'm
issue?
sure that there would be state involvement in that. I mean, there was for even American Unagi, it wasn't on the shore, it was just up by the river. You know, they had certain requirements that they had to follow. So
what are our options, Bill? We can leave it as.
I think we need, you know, this issue is going to need to be fleshed out more.
Yeah.
And we're not going to resolve it now at the, you know, the 11th hour.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, it's worthy of additional discussion.
well, I guess that's my question, because it's felt like it's the 11th hour in that we're expected to vote on this so we can go to the board, so it can go on the November ballot, right? Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So we are at the 11th hour.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that, you know.
Well, okay. But I guess that's my concern, is we're trying to resolve an issue that's maybe bigger and more complicated at the last minute.
here's the other part, we'll say on the commercial portion of it. This is not just talking about structures. This is talking about uses, including recreational. So if someone wants to have one of those temporary kayaking, paddleboard type rental places, if we strike that, we're pretty much saying that's not allowed in that area then.
Right. No, I think I agree with it.
That's-
That would be bad. And it's not different than what we have now. So
and if we do decide to table this,
Actually,
this means the
No, I know. but
the two or
if it
three.
starts there, it's all these other little-
We please not have two people
Yeah, I was
talking.
about to say, can I just finish my point? If we do decide to table this, then the individual private campsites and the industrial use for the commercial fisheries will still be allowed then. That's going to last for the next few months. So I'm just pointing that out when we're talking about tabling this.
well,
Being worried about commercial being allowed there.
as I think, I guess if we were to say we're going to table this, then, I mean, as far as I can see, there's only this one
Item.
discrepancy, this one item. And unless any other board member wants to pitch in here, I haven't heard, is there anything else about what we've discussed tonight that with the revisions and things that Bill and Max has discussed, is there anything else that we would change or want to talk further besides this one issue? Because then we could accept this and debate the thing later. But Bob, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do. I'm wondering where, because I'm not real familiar with this new document, where discussion of home occupation is in the document.
Home occupation's been in the land use ordinance for a while.
I know, but where in this particular version of it do I find it?
It should be in.
Isn't that the land use
Be
charts?
specific. Give me a moment here. Are you talking
Well,
about
the old ordinance had certain guidelines for what constituted a home occupation.
Correct. I'll find that while all this is being, should know it should be specific. I'll find, here it is. At the bottom of 10-8, it's number 10.11, home occupations.
Yeah, that we did not change.
We did not change.
Okay.
No, we didn't.
Well, I think.
So in residential, it's CEO.
My only concern about the definition that we've always had for home occupation is the limitations it places on employment. And I'm a terrible example of this because I ran a business on my property, residential property, for almost 15 years. And we had more employees than we were permitted by ordinance to have. And we were very fortunate that the town turned a blind eye to it.
I think.
But we had, in addition to my wife and myself, we had 3 and sometimes 4 employees working out of our facility here as a home occupation. And if we hadn't had that ability, the business wouldn't have grown the way it did. And some people in town wouldn't have had jobs. I think one of the things that is good about Waldoboro, and I'm not sure how we craft the language, but we have a lot of home-owned businesses in this town, and they should not have handcuffs put on them when they want to grow their businesses a little bit to accommodate additional business, additional activities. So if it's what we had in the past, I have concerns about that. We don't have to address them this time around, but it's something that I think is important for future economic growth in this town.
You have a category called cottage industries that are in between a home occupation and a full-size, like commercial, just for an example, activity. And that doesn't have a restriction on employees.
Where is that, Bill?
That is in, and that's been on the books for a while. That is in on page 10-44. It's section
6.33. And just quickly looking at the use chart, I believe we are expanding where cottage industries are allowed so that
It's not allowed in residential though.
it is not allowed in residential. It'll be allowed in the rural village. And we have it in downtown as well.
Yeah, 2,000 square foot building for a business isn't that big.
No, it says exterior storage will not exceed 2,000 square feet.
So,
Right, but in residential, and I think too now with like the gig economy, and I think it's very true in Maine that there's lots and lots of people who are working multiple jobs, not necessarily many hours in each job, and to piece together a workforce limited to only 2 additional people, you know, I think Bob is making a really good point. Even in a residential district, having 3 or 4 part-time employees coming in periodically during a week doesn't seem like it would be a burden. I don't know how you limit it to something rational, but I can see where 2 would be enough.
Some communities increase the number of outside employees beyond what we do, and you can certainly do that. But the principal purpose of home occupation is that you maintain the residential character.
Mm-hmm.
And that would mean the intensity of the use.
Yeah.
Hold on, we have not more than 2 other persons. I mean, you can certainly increase the number of people.
or even
Let's
just change
increase
it,
it to 4.
or just change it to full-time employee.
Well,
I'd say 4 or 5.
you could say, you can increase the number there.
How
Yeah,
much?
because it still requires that may not alter the residential character of the structure.
So, yeah.
So what number are we going with, 4 or 5?
Either's fine with me.
Well, let's think
you
of
brought
it in
it up.
terms of, let's think of it in terms of driveway usage. The minimum is like 26 trips a day. Medium volume is larger. You get to 5 people and 2 homeowners, you're getting into the medium to higher volume driveway, right? So
You
I'm
would,
just
but
thinking
you might not,
about
if you have 5 employees, they may not be there all the time. I think that's what Scott was saying, is that
But they might be.
they could be.
Right.
around
That's the
Christmas.
rub.
They might,
Yeah.
And if somebody has a business as a home occupation and has, say, 5 employees, and it gets busy and there's a lot of traffic in and out and noise and whatever, who enforces that? I mean, it's not supposed to change the character of a residential area, but how do you regulate that, really?
I mean, the regulation would be, Sarah, is that if they met the current standards.
Yeah.
If they've gotten bigger, then the town would say, well, you've gotten bigger, you've no longer a small home, so you gotta get approval on the other standards.
Increasing it to like 4 or 5 is not going to
Change too much.
Yeah, change it too much.
So 4 or 5.
I have to say we were lucky because we had 1 vehicle come up our driveway once a day, UPS, 5 days a week, and that was basically it. There was enough room for the employees to park. Neighbors didn't know what the heck was going on. There was no noise. And it was an internet-based business.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether those parameters assist you at all in trying to craft a description of what a home occupation is, but in our case, it was essential to have that flexibility.
I can really understand that. On the other hand, it seems like your kind of business and your location were really ideally suited to keeping it discreet.
I agree.
Vis-a-vis the rest of the neighborhood. And I'm not sure that would always be the case in other places. you know, every situation is a little different.
Well, because it does still say other than family members residing in the home.
Right.
Perhaps it should be at 4, so we're doubling it, but we also still have that in consideration for traffic access and whatnot.
Well, I mean, if you get a total of 5 outside employees, that's 10 vehicle trips per day.
Right.
So you're still presumably, you know, you're pretty, you know, close to the 25, but not necessarily over.
So 5, is that good for everyone?
But how many family members could there be? I mean, it might not be family members that live there. It could be family members that live elsewhere.
They would
It
count.
says shall be carried on only by residents of the dwelling unit and not more than 2 persons other than family members residing in the home.
That's a little.
Whoever resides in the home
And that's for that's to consider the traffic as well.
plus 2 more.
So the 5 could all be family members. It's still outside of the 2 that reside there. So
Correct.
doesn't matter if they're family members or not, if they're coming from outside the home.
Right.
What if you simply phrased it in terms of not having?
Other towns, you know, do go, I think 5 is typically the limit that they go to.
Right. 5's
Outside.
more than double what we have now. It, as you say, it doesn't even get close to 25.
Well, they're operating out there anyway.
Right.
Well, I'm comfortable with a motion to make it 4 or 5, whatever somebody wants to make a motion to make that change. Or we just make that change. We got to vote on the whole thing.
Yeah.
Comfortable with 4,
Okay.
but I'll
I'm
vote
fine
on
with-
either one. I make a motion that we double it to 4. And someone can make a motion to do it to 5 and see what happens.
I'll second Barbara's motion.
Okay. Sarah? What do you
I would
think?
I would agree with Barbara. I think that's a good number.
Okay.
All right.
So motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor signify aye. Aye.
I
Those opposed? Motion carried.
So made that change.
So is there anything else outside of this commercial fisheries maritime? So my understanding is our 2 options here are we accept this, then it goes to the select board, and then the select board would be able to get it on the November ballot. That if we decide to do something else tonight, it seems unlikely that it would be on the November ballot. And I'm imagining that there's a pretty strong feeling that people would like to get this on the November ballot. We are, as I think Max pointed out, we are striking the industrial part, which is existing in the current land use ordinance. Is that correct?
Correct. And we're also striking out individual private campsites.
Individual what?
Private campsites.
Private campsites. So that so that's significantly better from folks who want to preserve the landing areas to what they to the way it is now.
What you could do, I don't know if Bill will be fine with me making this suggestion, but you could recommend the ordinance with all the proposed changes and minor adjustments that I'll do afterwards for grammatical and formatting purposes. But you can also, again, don't know how Bill will feel about me saying this, but also make the recommendation that the planning board
Further discussion.
have further
Yeah.
discussion
That's a good point.
with the intention of more of a June warrant.
That's something, I would assume that that's what's going to happen. So that's a good idea.
Well, I guess I throw this out to the board, especially, and Elaine and Jim as Dutch Neck residents, how you feel about this.
I think a lot of work has been put into these regulations, and nobody's going to be happy with all of it, but I'm happy with it how it stands, and I'd like to see further discussion further on, but I'm happy for it to be on the November warrant.
Yeah, Jim?
I agree with Elaine. I think we've made strides forward. And the best thing is if any projected use comes up, we get to talk about it then and do the right thing. And as we've said before, we don't know what the future is going to hold. There might be something that comes up that we're in favor of. We don't know. Why not? Why close all the doors?
Yeah, and I think part of my concern with this involves a lot of different parts of this in terms of the definitions, and that's not a straightforward thing to resolve. And I also think this is a tremendous, again, thanking the committee and Bill and Max and everybody who worked on this. There's so much here that has been issues that the board has dealt with a lot in terms of clarity and organization and some fundamental changes to match up with the comprehensive plan. So I also don't feel like we ought to wait to hold this up over this what many people would consider a very minor issue and involving the definitions. So I'm fine with it as well. Is there anything else from Jim, Sarah, Barbara on this, or any of the select board members before we have a vote on this?
The only other thing I want is, when you say on this, you mean the entire package, right?
Correct.
Voting on this. Okay, the only other thing I want to say is we came in to this meeting with the LUA recommendation of having no amplified music to outside to having up to 12 events per year outside, as long as it's not too loud. So we went from one extreme to the other. And is that really what we wanted to do?
Wait, I'm confused. What? This is regarding
the minor event center.
Okay.
We entered looking at all this documentation with no amplified music played outside to 12 music events per year allowed.
Well, it doesn't have to be music events. They can be any events.
Right, but it could be music events.
Well, it could be.
It's permitted.
They would be just subject to the noise standard. That's what you're saying.
Right.
That was the
I'm just saying we went from one extreme to the other with this. And is that really what we wanted to do? It could be really annoying to that neighbor nearby. There's 12 musical events per year.
You can't, it becomes an impossibility to enforce some of these things, like the number of events with music and whatever. It's just not enforceable.
Because what if we'll say Cider Hill, that's the favorite example. Let's say they hold a wedding and someone for a brief moment just plugs in an amplifier to do some karaoke. Are we going to count that even if it's for 10 minutes? Who was that who just left? That was probably Bob, yeah.
But I'm fine with making
okay,
that.
all right.
Yeah.
I was just pointing it out, that's all.
But no, I don't think there was any other changes.
Okay. So I need a motion to approve the draft of the new land use ordinance with the changes that we've described tonight.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Any other further questions or comments? All those in favor signify aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried. Okay.
Now, I know it is 20 to 9, but
it is
two items we have.
Yes.
Very quick. We could probably be done in 5 minutes.
Yeah. The floodplain management ordinance.
Yes.
There's been no changes to that. The only thing we're doing is taking it out of the body of the land use ordinance and having it as a separate ordinance The reason for that is that it is formatted and coded much differently than our regular ordinance, and at least the state model is. And whenever we have to make a change to it, which happens periodically, it becomes a nightmare to reformat. So it's easier just to keep it as a separate document.
And the final version will have the Waldoboro seal on the front.
Yeah.
Well, I looked at it, it was fine for me. Any questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I second it.
Motion made and seconded to approve the floodplain management ordinance as a separate ordinance. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Okay,
You want to explain the zone change?
Yes, last item, everyone
Yeah.
should have a copy of this. This is just placing the lot or the map lot U463, which is the 80 Gray School. We are taking it from the village district and putting it in the historic village. We are essentially just moving the boundary line of the historic village a bit more outwards. The reason we are doing this is because we are looking into placing it on the National Historic Register, along with other buildings in Waldoboro. The National Registry does not have standards. So what we are doing is moving it in there. So there are architectural standards required for any development on it. The second reason is so we can remove the density requirements so that if someone does want to turn it into a residential building, such as Volunteers of America, who would like to turn it into 32 senior housing units, they will not need additional acreage, such as the 80 Gray Field or the Philbrook Ball Field. There are different uses that would be allowed, but those are the two main reasons why the change is being made.
and this also has to go on the ballot, correct?
This also does have to go on the warrant.
Yeah.
Max, I'm sorry I didn't review this ahead of time, but I can't find it in my inbox.
I think I sent it the day I was distributing it to everyone. I could walk up to the camera and show it if you'd like.
No, it's okay. I just feel a little handicapped because I don't have it to read.
I mean, you just explained what it does.
It's just a picture of the lot, and
Going from blue to orange.
Yeah.
Okay.
Changes one color to another.
Yep.
It includes that triangular property, Sarah, since you can't see it, includes the triangular property that's across the street from the school.
Yeah.
Oh, that little schoolhouse on it?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also includes the tennis courts, but I mean.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Sorry.
That's all right.
So you answered the one question I would have, Max, and that's that it's going to simplify rather than complicate any negotiations with Volunteers of America.
Volunteers, yeah, it simplifies it with, well, Volunteers of America, or if the deal does not go through, it does help with guaranteeing that the school has to remain a certain way if we do have a different person. That, I think, is the best way.
Yep.
I think that's great. I think, to put my non-planning board hat on, but my resident hat on, I think one of the, well, there's partly planning board. One of the things that we struggle with the planning board often is a application that may well meet the land use ordinance as it is written, but that the neighbors don't like it. And the neighbors don't like it because it's not fitting with the character of the neighborhood. And that's part of our discretion as a planning board to vote yea or nay, depending on citizen input, especially abutters, that they have rights of this is commensurate with our neighborhood or not. So I think 80 Gray is an example where I think rightly so, the town is trying to accommodate the residents in the neighborhood, that the building would be commensurate with what it has been so that it matches up with the neighborhood. And I think that is a good thing. But I think that also, you know, one of the difficulties that makes it easier for the planning board in this particular case relative to A.D. Gray and the town in negotiating with people that want to use that building. But that power of the planning board can sometimes be weak relative to preserving the nature of a neighborhood, and depends on how many and how vociferous the neighbors are in terms of how that application is treated. And I guess that goes right back to it does go back to the issue we were talking about relative to the Dutch Neck Landing, that the neighborhood has certain, you know, the neighbors have certain feelings about what's within character of the neighborhood for that place. And, you know, I just think going forward in the future, I would hope that the town would be as accommodating towards them as the town is being towards the neighborhood of A.D. Gray, where people don't go, I mean, really, the A.D. Gray building is just in the neighborhood. Nobody's going there or driving by. Tourists don't go there unless you have a reason to go there, which is not true from a lot of places on the river that we want to preserve. So just my commentary.
They wanted to strengthen what the town could do on this one lot, and hopefully the voters of the town will see that way as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to get that something good into the A.D. Gray building. So are there any other questions or comments on this before we have a motion on this? Is there a motion to approve the zoning change for the A.D. Gray lots?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Anything else on this? All those in favor signify aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay.
I think that's the 3 items we had.
Woo, okay, perfect. So any comments, questions from anybody before we adjourn? I would like to again thank the Land Use Committee, Elaine as its chairman, Holly, who is not there anymore, and Bill and Max for all the work, and also Bill and Max for leading us through tonight's discussion. A lot to cover, and I think we did well. Anything else? Jan, did you have anything you wanted to add? You haven't said anything?
You're on mute.
You're on mute, yeah. Bottom left corner, you should see a mic.
I think she's begging off saying anything.
I think she's saying how we all did a tremendous job. We all need a week vacation with all pay.
You're good at reading lips, Max.
Yep.
We still can't hear you, Jan.
Jan, if you can hear me, bottom left of the corner, there should be a mic.
I hit it.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay, I hit it one other time. Maybe I need to do it 2 times. Okay, I was here to listen, and I did. It was long, but I liked the way you worked together. Excellent. And I just thought, as a select board member, I needed to know a little more about what was going on and what changes were happening and so on. And the other thing, you know, having lived here close to 50 years, I always have to stop and think when you're calling it the landing, that was always Marine Park. You have Marine Park, and then you have the landing. And the one on Dutch Neck is Marine Park. So I always, every time
you call it something else, I go,
oh, they mean Marine Park.
Ah.
But anyway, that's just an old.
Well, I like that name
You
better, actually.
talk about Dutch Neck Landing, but in the day, well, years ago, it was always referred to as Marine Park. If you went to Marine Park, you're in Dutch Neck. If you go to the landing, you're in town.
I think
You know?
it has that too.
Called the Marine.
So, and I thought that was interesting, but
That's funny.
I think officially it has the name Dutch.
it was called, well, 50 years ago, it was called Marine Park. And, you know, my family was that, they were here for, they were the marine resources folks. And it was always referred to as Marine Park. Anyway, so that just took me back in time, but it's a lovely spot down there, and I'm glad we're working on it, and I'm glad people are there wanting to preserve its beauty. So that's good. Hey guys, you guys have done a lot of work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
And Max and Bill also
just a
have
note.
done lots of work. So I have to go do the dishes because I didn't get a chance to clean the kitchen after.
All right. Have a good night then, Jan. What I was just going to say is what I will do is over the course of the weekend, at least, assuming the select board does approve, I will put the more updated finished version with all the spelling corrections and references and everything. I'll put that online as the replacement for what is there right now.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Just so that there's no confusion on some members of town saying, well, this addresses up, this doesn't have any of this, and I'm just going to put that up so it's
Yeah,
more.
well, that's always good.
Right.
That's always good. So the references are there if we need to look at them.
Right.
Good. Good, good. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Okay,
I'm
so,
gonna-
I'd like to
Okay.
make a motion to just get dismissed.
okay, motion made to adjourn. Is there a
I'll-
second?
I'll second it.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. There be no debate on a motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Thank
Aye.
you all for
Aye. All
sticking it out
opposed?
this long.
All opposed? No. Okay.